After the success of Animatrix, Warner did really jump on, and they pushed for anime in a lot of different projects. The DC animated universe already, in part, was animated by TMS through Telecom. It wasn't exactly like they'd never used these things before. However, with Batman Gotham Knight, they expanded it further back into that anthology base, now loosely within the Nolan universe. It was released off the boom of The Dark Knight's pre-release too. We wanted it to be literally anime. We hired 6 different animation teams in Japan, 6 different Japanese directors to handle each segment. That's Bruce Timm for you. While Fosse did not spearhead this collection, as they have in the prior ones, they did make 2 shorts for it, starting with Have I Got a Story for You? And this is based off an older comic, and it even saw an adaptation in the animated series, an episode people are very fond of as well. It also just happens that the director actually worked on the show, so there's like a connection there. The animation direction here comes from Tekon Kinkreets, as well as the prior art director, and that gives it the same energy, the rebellious kids with fast motion and skateboarding this time. The game, though, is who is the real Batman? And as we see, the several kids recount their meeting with him in all these different forms. Many have similar variations from the comic. There's just a bunch of sharp, punchy movements that come from its looser styles. It's definitely not the kind of traditional aesthetic you see from a Batman story. And they also really push the otherworldly aspect of the character. And that's really helped by that it is more of a tale, a myth, than it is reality. And you can kind of see the contrast between the two later on in the picture. There's an ability to push past the preconceived notions of what it should be and just have fun with it. It's even kind of tongue-in-cheek with its own bolstering of these fables and what they can get away with.
Yeah, well, the dude ain't no giant flying bat.
And highlighted throughout is definitely the Rashomon structure, even how there's sort of a more distinct look between each variation of the story, and how they present the character within the kids' skate park. Not dissimilar to Animatrix. They brought on different screenwriters for each of the shorts. This one has Joss Olson, who wrote it. However, Olson wrote the script with complete descriptions for the animation team to work off. He really wanted them to give him his dream vision, so he made sure it was a very detailed script. As he said, it's animated for a reason. It's not an arbitrary choice, so I had to do something that justifies the medium. And this one definitely does. Anyway, pretty good. I like this one. Now, when we get to the second short, Brian Asariel said that he wrote the script for the second short here, and then handed it off. And I think this tells a little picture of how much control the animated creators had. Even within the Animatrix, there was a little bit of back and forth. And here it's mostly 100% whatever they wanted to do. This time we have Toshiyuki Kuboka alongside Nayuki Onda on character designs. These are grounded and detailed characters in comparison, but they do have a clean edge, and it fits the downtrodden story. And what's interesting is you don't actually see the actual Batman get into a fight with a single person. It's all implied, in the real time that is. It also focuses on an underexplored element like the Batman mythos, which is the training and healing of his parents' death. Starting to get into the full blood and guts of it, and it's kind of an unflattering portrait of young Bruce's journeys. And it's kind of almost aware of the idea of that there's a lot of arrogance in him, that he's sort of this rich white kid going halfway across the world to suddenly become a master of techniques that usually take decades for people to learn. And in this case, he's actually rejected from training for being dishonest. And there's a good contrast here between the sickly sewers, which have a nightmarish sort of quality to them, and the serene warm tones of being in India. The sort of soft blur around it. It's a tale of failure, which again, you don't necessarily see a lot of the vulnerability in these Batman stories. We do get one fight in the flashback, and it's really spectacular, honestly. It shows the true potential of Fosse when it does have the ability to go into flat-out action. And that's not always the case, but we'll get into that later. I will say the ending is beyond camp and a little bit silly, for the tone especially, but I'll put that on the script writers more than on the animation, though they do really sell it. I'll leave you with this final hilarious image.
I can't.
Yeah, Batman Gotham Knight, pretty alright. Fosse made some valid contributions to that one. They definitely had the most energy and creativity out of the output they did with DC. However, that's not the last time they had a relationship with them. They made further adaptations for the DC animated film series. These pictures follow more of the animation American production, so they're kind of more just there to fill in the gaps. There's a sort of level of growing pains here, where it leads to sort of disjointed action and some really flat stuff as they work with the storyboards given by DC. And that's not always the worst of the situations, but yeah, I feel like they could have been better in this regard. Some of that also relates back to the models itself, because they trying to go for these character designs that are very detailed and shiny and sort of refined, very like difficult to animate. And you can see that in Emerald Knight, which to be fair is kind of taking it from the prior Telecom animation outlet, but where like Telecom's version was very lavished and was the first of the animated movies in that era to use Telecom back, which was definitely a delight to see. Knight is not quite there. Like, it still has the same outfits, but they really don't get moments to like take advantage of the sort of techniques and craziness of the sort of skills that the Green Lanterns have. And yeah, I'm not really particularly a fan of the way they're presented here. I would have probably preferred a more Bruce Timm simplified look, since it's just so action heavy. And honestly, the Green Lanterns are just like some of the best characters for a 2D animation showcase, because they have the ability to create anything with their rings. And here it's kind of tame. They use it more in like a military like element for the most part. I don't really want to dismiss the whole film, because I do feel like there's some really good storyboarding at certain aspects, especially during the opening. It's probably one of my favorite parts. And there's definitely some flourishes through with the animation. I don't think 4C does a bad job. I just don't think the material they're working with is up to the standards of what I expect from them. They feel a little bit repressed, let's say. Yeah, and sometimes the tempo of a fight just doesn't feel correct. And maybe that's because they have to follow the boards to a T. Though I will give credit for the backgrounds being really good. The drawings and like with the sign of that, like, yeah, it looks really nice. Although here I feel like the story is kind of lacking, because it's effectively 5 anthology stories in itself over each of these different Green Lanterns, but there isn't a huge amount of time to sort of flesh them all out, and it ultimately comes off very disjointed, because the backdrop of it all is like what's supposed to be an actual Armageddon. So I'm not really interested in these stupid stories while I'm waiting to see like the end of the world. I don't know. I suppose like your mileage may vary if you actually have like invested in these characters at all. I'm not a huge fan of the Green Lantern universe in general. And I feel like it's a missed opportunity for them to not use like the unique approach for each shot. They could have had a lot more fun visually with them that way, but they kind of kept them very consistent. But there's a couple of shots that I like more than the rest. In terms of like the Planet Green Lantern one, I thought was at least fun, and bringing back Abin Sur kind of brings a bit more of the mythology of these characters back. And yeah, I'm not discrediting 4C. They did fine. I wish they'd gave them a project like the prior First Flight over this one, quite frankly, though. Anyway, to be fair, like a couple years later, they kind of got something like that with Flashpoint, which is definitely a step up in a lot of ways, but starting with the one way I don't think it is the character design. I think they're really ugly and monster men, and because they're even more like articulate, that does limit like the potential of the animation. I don't really know where these designs have came from, because it's like they're using a character design they've used a lot, and it's not even from the comics, because they take a more, just traditional comic DC approach to the story. I guess you'd say it could fit like the brooding, grimdark atmosphere, but it is a little bit ridiculous. Though, like, again, like I think the boarding here has some highlights, and I feel like this time the director had a bit more control, so the fight scenes generally come off better than they did in the prior one. They have a bit more bite to them as well because of the edge that's here, and that's kind of a double-edged sword in itself, but like there is no like holding back here, at least, so they can really go at it in what is effectively like an all-out war. Also, I very much appreciate them bringing back Red Sky Gotham, I'll say that much. This is a period where 4C has really not got down with like 3D character models yet, and there's an effect they use continuously through the film and in the final shots that looks really jarringly jank. It feels like an action figure thrown onto the side of a wall. I understand why it's in the final sequence, but using it through the rest of the film, no. They still need some work there. It is a little harder to talk about these like later Warner Brother movies, because I don't really know where 4C was involved and where they weren't. They're kind of just contractors in here. I gotta say, as a movie, Flashpoint doesn't really do much for me. I think the concept is interesting, but it is just like horrendously edgy, and towards the end kind of runs out of steam with the idea that I feel like 4C is a little bit misused. It's a shame they never got to do like a Tekon Kin Street kind of loose, playful, street level Batman story or something like that, or any of these other characters, and really given like full reign. But I guess Warner Bros. Had gave 4C other prior projects, which they did pretty decent with. Say, for example, 2011's Thundercats, where they were obviously playing off Avatar, but they seemed to have, a lot more they could do there. And there's some really standout episodes, And even though it is the prior director from all these other like international projects, I feel like it's a really good one. There's a lot of fun to be had there. Here's another example where Warner Bros. Let them go at it. The dynamic showdown of this Gumball episode, which was kind of based on a Trigger like character dynamic, but it was actually done by 4C. And yeah, it was good.
Impossible! How?
And there's something pragmatic about 4C's approach to animation. Whenever they're needed, they fill the role they're supposed to. Though I do prefer to see 4C produce stuff with a lot more leeway, because I feel that's when they're doing their best work. I feel like something that Bruce Timm said about the anthology Gotham Knight is actually quite telling to this situation. So I read the storyboard and I'll be really tempted to put notes on it, like you need to close up here, you need to do this here. That's not going to work. But I really had to stop myself and say, you know what? I don't know if this is going to work or not, because it's a different language. And when it comes down to it, like I think that's a lot of the philosophy of 4C, is being able to trust the creators to make the right decisions for the project they're making, no matter how small. Hello there, we have a cat over here. And you have just watched a 4Sember or a 4C month video. Now there's supposed to be a bunch of them. We're supposed to be releasing them every day after all. And at the end of the month we should have a full expanded revised version for everyone to see. If you want to keep checking them out, there should be a playlist probably on the screen, I'm guessing. And to thank everyone who has helped support me during this period of time, it's been a little bit hectic to try and get these videos out. I need to thank all my patrons who get exclusive content. I got a lot of stuff earlier, etc., etc. Jay, Steven's mum, Takayuki Suzuki, Alex Moriarty, Paul, Subsofa, I hope I'm saying that right, and Chunks. Among all these other people, I've had to expand. We're in the editing dock right now, but I've had to expand the screen because I knew there was more space I needed to get all the names on there, so I've changed the angle slightly. Yeah, thanks everyone for their support. Check out tomorrow for the next video. I'll catch you.